In the year 410 AD, the heart of the Western world was under siege. Beyond the formidable Aurelian walls, Alaric, king of the Visigoths, stood with his army, demanding tribute. For nearly 8 centuries, the city of Rome itself had stood inviolate, a symbol of unparalleled power and civilization. But the empire, once an unstoppable force, was now a shadow of its former self, its strength eroded by decades of internal strife and relentless external pressures. The very idea of Rome falling was unthinkable, yet the cold reality of Alaric's presence whispered a different truth. The Eternal City was on the brink. Long before Alaric's siege, the seeds of decline had been sown. The Roman Empire, sprawling across 3 continents, was simply too vast to govern effectively. Economic stability faltered under the weight of bloated bureaucracy and constant warfare, leading to rampant inflation and heavy taxation. Political corruption became endemic, with emperors rising and falling in quick succession, often at the whim of the military. Even attempts at reform, like Emperor Diocletian's division of the empire into the Tetrarchy, ultimately highlighted the growing disparity and fragmentation within the Roman world. The once mighty legions were now thinly stretched, often composed of mercenaries with dubious loyalty. Compounding Rome's internal weaknesses was the growing pressure along its vast frontiers. Germanic tribes, like the Goths and Vandals, driven by the fearsome Huns from the east, increasingly sought refuge or conquest within Roman lands. These were not always simple invaders, often, they were displaced people seeking a new home, clashing violently with a declining empire unable to absorb them. The devastating defeat at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, where Emperor Valens and much of his eastern army perished against the Visigoths, was a stark turning point, demonstrating Rome's vulnerability and the growing power of its so-called barbarian foes. Theodosius I, the last emperor to rule both East and West, recognized the immense challenge of governing such a fractured entity. Upon his death in 395 AD, he formally divided the empire between his 2 sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. This division, intended to create more manageable administrative units, instead cemented the divergent fates of the 2 halves. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, was wealthier and more defensible, prospering for centuries. The Western Empire, however, with its new capital in Ravenna, was left with vulnerable borders and weaker leadership, like the young and ineffective Emperor Honorius. Against this backdrop of decay, Alaric's Visigoths finally breached Rome's defenses in August 410 AD. For 3 days, the city that had once ruled the world was plundered. While historical accounts suggest the sack was less destructive than later events, its psychological and symbolic impact was immense. The Eternal City had fallen, a testament to the empire's utter failure to protect its heart. News of the sack sent shockwaves across the Roman world, with figures like Saint Jerome lamenting the end of an era. The event shattered the illusion of Roman invincibility, signaling a terrifying new reality. The mid-5th century brought new horrors with the terrifying advance of Attila the Hun. Leading a vast coalition of nomadic warriors, Attila carved a path of destruction across Gaul and Italy. His campaign culminated in 452 AD, when he marched towards Rome. It was not Roman legions that saved the city this time, but Pope Leo I, who famously met Attila outside Rome's gates and persuaded him to turn back. While the precise details remain debated, this encounter highlights the diminishing military power of the Western Empire and the rising moral authority of the Church in a collapsing world. Despite the reprieve from Attila, Rome was far from safe. Just 3 years later, in 455 AD, the city suffered an even more brutal sack at the hands of the Vandals, led by King Gaiseric. This time, the plunder lasted for 14 days. The Western Empire was now a mere shell, its emperors largely powerless puppets controlled by powerful Germanic generals like Ricimer. These warlords, often of barbarian descent themselves, held the true reins of power, appointing and deposing emperors at will. The imperial throne became a revolving door, reflecting the terminal instability of the state. The final, decisive act came in 476 AD. A young boy, Romulus Augustulus, sat on the Western Roman throne, a poignant symbol of the empire's infancy and weakness. His reign was brief. Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain leading a coalition of mercenary troops, demanded land in Italy. When denied, Odoacer swiftly deposed Romulus Augustulus, sending the imperial regalia to Constantinople. Crucially, Odoacer did not appoint a new emperor. Instead, he simply declared himself king of Italy, effectively bringing the line of Western Roman emperors to an end. The curtain had fallen. While 476 AD marks a symbolic end, the fall of Rome was a complex, gradual process rather than a single catastrophic event. The Eastern Roman Empire, known as Byzantium, continued for another 1,000 years, preserving much of Roman law, culture, and learning. In the West, Germanic kingdoms adopted Roman administrative practices, even as Europe descended into what some call the Dark Ages. Yet, Rome's legacy endured. Its legal systems, Latin language, architectural achievements, and concept of empire profoundly shaped Western civilization, continuing to echo in our laws, languages, and institutions even today.